Hello everyone, this is Ange. So according to a previous poll I made, the topic people wanted me to talk about most in a separate video is the bare minimum required to read a visual novel in Japanese. According to another poll on my community tab, as well as other communities I've seen, some people would want to read visual novels in Japanese, but just don't feel they have the confidence or the time to do so. I'm hoping with this video, I can ease both of those concerns for some people. A few quick caveats before I get started. 1. I am not advocating this as the best way to becoming proficient at the Japanese language. 2. I do not condone the use of machine translation programs for learning Japanese, and will not talk about them in name at all. Anyway, let's get started. So in the first part of this video, I want to go over the actual Japanese you should know before you would even consider starting reading. First of all, you absolutely need to know the Japanese's two core alphabets, Hiragana and Katakana. Hiragana is the first and most important alphabet you should learn. Hiragana is Japan's main way of showing how to pronounce every single possible syllable in the Japanese language. Unlike in English, where there are long and short pronunciations of vowels, every hiragana will always be pronounced the same. Besides knowing how to pronounce each syllable, knowing hiragana is important for looking up Japanese words, especially ones that use kanji. When looking up words you don't know, most Japanese dictionary sites will have hiragana above the words to show how to properly pronounce the words. Do not rely on Romanized English of Japanese syllables, or else it will be harder to read and look up words in the long run. The next alphabet you have to learn is Katakana. Unlike hiragana, which is used for Japanese words and looking up kanji, katakana is Japan's way of writing and pronunciating words foreign to Japan, representing onomatopoeias, technical or scientific terms, names or plants, animals, etc. Here's an example of a humorous line from Senran Banka, where Koharu talks in English, and the text using katakana to show that off.
I can know English なのに
It might be daunting to have to learn two alphabets with over 40 characters each right out the gate. One thing that helps is that hiragana and katakana have the exact same pronunciations, just with different characters. Where can you learn hiragana and katakana? Thankfully, there are plenty of charts and websites on the internet that show you every single one with the pronunciations in English. At this point, it's finding your personal best way to drill it in your head. Don't feel discouraged if you feel like you're learning and retaining these too slowly. Even if you only spend 10 to 15 minutes a day just memorizing and reviewing, it's a lot better than spending 6 hours or so than burning out and not studying for over a week or two. Consistency is more important for retaining than binging. Just knowing these two alphabets alone can remove some of the frustration of deciphering the, as the meme calls them, moon runes. So once you have properly memorized the two alphabets, you need to study up on some essential basic to intermediate grammar. It's one thing to be able to read or look up words. It's another to connect them and be able to actually read the sentence as it's intended. So grammar is a little bit more difficult to explain, but I'll give some quick types of examples you'll learn along the way. There are particles, written as hiragana, that can do things like determine the topic of a sentence, showing the object of a verb action, or the direction or location of some action. There are conjugations of verbs and sometimes adjectives, usually to connect when an action happened or how polite you want the speaker to sound. Sometimes, there's cases where adding two words together gives a somewhat different meaning than if you were to read them separately. These are just very quick examples of what to expect. So the next question is, where exactly do you learn grammar? There are quite a lot of resources, both online and in textbooks. The main online resource I personally used was Tai Kim's Guide to Learning Japanese Guide. Many people consider it the quickest, but not necessarily most in-depth way to learn grammar specifically. There are various other sites I've heard about where Japanese grammar learning is a bit slower, but more in-depth, like Imabi and Marugoto. If you prefer a more typical in-person textbook study with exercises and answer sheets, definitely consider Genki 1 and 2. Figuring out how long it takes to be good with grammar before continuing to read a visual novel is tough to figure out. I personally studied 46 months studying grammar before I felt comfortable starting a visual novel, but depending on how much time and effort you put, it could be way shorter or way longer. Once again, the most important part is consistency, studying at least once a day. Honestly, once you have the two alphabets memorized, plus most of the essential grammar down, I'd say you're at a very good point to actually pick up a visual novel to start reading. Once again, this is not the optimal way to read a Japanese, just the way I think that requires the least amount of effort. If you feel more comfortable studying some kanji and vocabulary using flashcards like Anki, books like Remembering the Kanji, or apps like Duolingo, definitely feel free to do any of those as much as you want first. So let's get started on actually picking a visual novel to read in Japanese. I've seen multiple viewpoints on where you can start. Some people try to do a visual novel with little to no kanji, like Hanahira, so you can get used to seeing the two main alphabets in real sentences. However, Hanahira itself is generally considered a very mediocre girls' love slice-of-life visual novel. Some people just say to stick with anything slice-of-life first, since you won't have to learn a lot of words and vocab that are specific to a fantasy setting you don't know much about. The philosophy I personally agree most with is just to pick something you actually want to read and stick with. No matter which visual novel you start with, you'll likely be reading at a very slow pace, aka at least 5 times slower than how fast you read in English, or whatever your most comfortable language is. So it's better to stick with something you'll know will keep your motivation. My first visual novel in Japanese was the fan disc of Koizuru Natsu no Last Resort, since the original was a pull-top latte VN with a fan translation I enjoyed and wanted to see more of. It had the added bonus of being in a slice-of-life resort setting, so most words I would look up are ones that I would be able to use in real life. If you go with the method I've recommended thus far, you're going to be looking up the vast majority of words up just to understand what the characters are saying. However, knowing hiragana, katakana, and grammar will ease the frustration, which I'll show in a demonstration later on in this video. If you want to buy visual novels digitally in Japanese, some places include DMM, DL Site, and Getchu. Keep in mind that many visual novels, especially from DMM, have some kind of DRM, aka digital rights management, to help restrict users from redistributing media to others, aka pirating. Usually, DRM is as simple as typing in your login one time with internet access after opening the executable, then you never have to worry again. So once you've figured out the visual novel you want to read, let's start the process of actually reading. The main method people use to help them read visual novels is a tool called Textractor, developed by Artikash. This is a tool that can grab the Japanese text in a visual novel and copy it directly to your clipboard, so you can paste this sentence in a Japanese dictionary like jisho.org to make looking up the words you don't know a lot faster. In most cases, when using Textractor, it's as simple as opening up the visual novel, opening Attached to Game in Textractor, finding the visual novel that's opened up, and clicking OK. Once you start seeing text in the visual novel, click on the top drop-down that says Console, then keep clicking through the options until the text matches exactly what shows in the visual novel screen. Once you do that, you'll be good to go. Now you can just grab the next line of text by advancing in the visual novel itself. When choosing Attached to Game, if you see both a .exe and .log option, generally you want to pick the .log to get the proper text. Occasionally, there are visual novels where Textractor can't load up any entries in the top dropdown, even after Textractor properly attaches itself to it. For cases like these, you'll need a hook code, which is a special code needed for programs like Textractor to be able to properly extract text from the visual novel. You can find most hook codes for visual novels in a site called vnhookingfandom.com wiki hcode. Once you click Add Hook on Textractor, you can add a code for the visual novel in question. Then you should be able to start getting text for the visual novel properly. Once you can consistently grab text from the visual novel, it's time to look up words you don't know. The most common online Japanese dictionary I see recommended is jisho.org and is my personal go-to for most manual lookups. If you want a way to have automatic lookups, a very common method is to use a Firefox browser extension called Rikaichamp, where you can paste text somewhere in a browser, then mouse over the Japanese words to get a pop-up that shows the definitions, which will include the hiragana. There is a similar extension called Yomichan, which works on both Firefox and Chrome. With Yomichan, you need to install dictionaries to make it look up Japanese words properly, but thankfully, the extension shows how to do that easily. Firefox also has a Nazeka extension if you don't want to paste the text somewhere in the browser first. You just right-click Open Reader in the Extensions menu, then a little pop-up will show that will automatically copy text from the clipboard that you can hover over, similar to Yomi-chan and Rikaichamp. If you don't want to use a browser, there is an offline option using Translation Aggregator's JParser window after installing the proper dictionaries, which you can find in the description below. If for some reason you're having trouble getting text with Textractor, there are a few other options you can try. There is an older text hooker called ITH-VNR that I didn't really try. There's also QiTrans Lite, but once again, I have not used. There are a couple of apps that use OCR, or optical character recognition, to grab text by having the app screen cap the text and do its best to interpret it into proper Japanese. The first is Visual Novel OCR, and may require a decent amount of tinkering to get the right Japanese text showing. The second is Game to Text, where I might like the OCR better than Visual Novel OCR actually. However, it also has other features like Mac support, Yomi-chan and Anki interaction, audio recording, and automatic screenshots. There are various online communities you can join if you're stuck learning the language in some way, whether it's figuring out what a word or kanji is, figuring out the grammar being used, or something like that. If you do decide to ask for help interpreting a line from a visual novel, make sure to bring up the context, as Japanese is a very context-heavy language. I've personally gone on various learning Japanese discords, and many people are happy to answer as long as you ask in a beginner or help channel. The screen only shows a handful of the learning Japanese discords I know are out there. Anyway, that's about it. I hope this video helped anyone looking into reading visual novels in Japanese and ease at least some of your concerns. Learning Japanese is not easy, and it may be a long road to learning, but as I said multiple times, it's all about consistency. Try to study or read Japanese at least 10 to 15 minutes a day, but if you do more, that's even better. If you have any questions about this video, basic Japanese language questions, or reading visual novels in Japanese, feel free to leave a comment below. For any Japanese language veterans watching this video, there's a chance I forgot something important, so feel free to leave a comment for anything I left out. See you all in the next video.